What if I told you that some of the most astonishing technological achievements in human history weren't born in Silicon Valley or during the Industrial Revolution, but thousands of years ago, crafted by hands that worked without blueprints, without computers, and without the scientific jargon we take for granted today? We often picture ancient civilizations through a romantic, yet simplistic lens: stone tools, basic agriculture, perhaps the occasional architectural wonder. But hidden beneath the dust of centuries lies a different story altogether, one that challenges our very understanding of progress and innovation. It's a story of minds every bit as brilliant and curious as our own, who observed the world with a clarity that allowed them to engineer solutions we're still struggling to fully replicate even now. This isn't about myth or speculation. This is about tangible, physical evidence, artifacts, and inventions so sophisticated, so precise, that they feel almost out of place in the timelines we've constructed. We're going to journey through 23 such marvels, each one a testament to a creativity that defies the constraints of its era. From astronomical calculators that could predict celestial movements with stunning accuracy, to self-healing concrete that has outlasted empires, these inventions don't just represent isolated flashes of genius. They point toward entire schools of knowledge, entire systems of understanding that were, in some cases, lost for millennia, waiting patiently for us to rediscover and appreciate them. So consider this an invitation to look at history not as a linear march from primitive to advanced, but as a tapestry rich with cycles of brilliance, rediscovery, and awe. Together, we'll explore devices that challenge what we thought was possible, materials that have endured through the ages with almost supernatural resilience, and ideas so forward-thinking they seem to whisper across time. You might just find yourself rethinking everything from the tools in your kitchen to the phone in your hand, because innovation isn't just a modern phenomenon, it's a deeply human one. And this journey into the past might just change how you see the future. Picture this: a storm-tossed ship sinks to the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea sometime in the 1st century before the Common Era. It rests there, shrouded in darkness and silence, for more than 2,000 years. Then, in the year 1900, sponge divers exploring the waters off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera stumble upon the wreck. Among the corroded bronze statues and shattered pottery, they recover a lump of heavily encrusted, calcified gearwork that seems completely out of place. At first glance, it was dismissed as a piece of navigational equipment or perhaps an astrolabe, but it was so badly damaged and corroded that its true significance was entirely missed for decades. It wasn't until the 1970s that historians and scientists, using advanced X-ray and imaging technology, were finally able to peer inside that rock-hard lump and realize they were looking at one of the most stunningly complex mechanical objects to survive from the ancient world. This device, now known as the Antikythera Mechanism, consisted of a wooden box housing at least 30 finely crafted interlocking bronze gears. The largest gear had 223 teeth, each one hand cut with astonishing precision. The front of the mechanism featured 2 concentric dials that displayed the movement of the sun and moon through the zodiac, while a separate hand tracked the year according to the Egyptian calendar. But its functions went far beyond a simple calendar. By turning a hand crank on the side, the operator could advance or reverse time, and the gears would move in perfect synchrony to predict the positions of the 5 known planets, forecast lunar and solar eclipses, and even indicate the timing of major athletic festivals like the ancient Olympic Games. It was, in essence, a portable, mechanical simulation of the universe as the Greeks understood it. The sophistication of this machine is simply mind-boggling. It employed a complex differential gear, a component previously believed to have been invented in the 16th century, which allowed it to account for the Moon's irregular elliptical orbit by varying its speed. This means its creators didn't just understand astronomy, they had a profound grasp of complex mechanical physics and mathematical cycles. The historian Derek de Solla Price, who dedicated years to studying the fragments, famously concluded that its complexity was comparable to that of an 18th-century Swiss clock. Finding something like this from a time when we imagine people using simple tools is like finding a jet engine in the workshop of the Wright brothers. It completely upends our traditional, linear narrative of technological progress. So who built it? While we may never know the specific genius behind it, the mechanism is almost certainly a product of the vibrant intellectual culture of the Hellenistic world, a period following the conquests of Alexander the Great that saw incredible advances in science, mathematics, and engineering. It's thought that the device may have been constructed in a workshop on the island of Rhodes, a known center for astronomical study, and was perhaps being transported on that ill-fated ship to be delivered to a wealthy patron. The most haunting thought is that this mechanism was almost certainly not unique. Cicero, the Roman philosopher, wrote about a device brought to Rome by the general Marcellus that sounded remarkably similar, a bronze sphere made by Archimedes that replicated the motions of the heavens. The Antikythera Mechanism is likely a rare, surviving example of a whole class of sophisticated devices that were lost, along with the knowledge to create them, as the classical world declined into centuries of turmoil. It stands as a ghostly echo of a path not taken, a level of technological artistry that wouldn't be seen again for over a millennium. Now, shift your focus from the intricate gears of a celestial computer to the chaotic, terrifying theater of ancient naval warfare. Imagine being a sailor on an enemy ship approaching the mighty walls of Constantinople in the 7th century. You've heard the whispers, the rumors of a weapon so fearsome it seems almost supernatural. Suddenly, from a strange tube mounted on a Byzantine dromon, a stream of liquid fire arcs across the water. It hits the sea itself and doesn't sizzle out. Instead, it erupts into a roaring, uncontrollable inferno that clings to everything it touches: your wooden hull, the sails, the water around you. You throw sand on it, you try to douse it with water, but that only seems to make it burn more fiercely. This was the horrifying reality of Greek fire, a technological secret so potent it helped preserve the Byzantine Empire for centuries. The true genius of Greek fire, known to the Byzantines as sea fire or liquid fire, wasn't just its terrifying effect but the sophisticated chemistry behind it. While its exact formula was a state secret of the highest order, lost with the fall of Constantinople, modern historians and chemists have pieced together likely ingredients based on contemporary accounts. The base was almost certainly a form of crude petroleum or naphtha, drawn from natural oil seeps in the region. To this, they likely added resins or sulfur to help it adhere to surfaces and quicklime, a compound that generates intense heat when it comes into contact with water. This last ingredient is the key to its most frightening property: the fact that water would not extinguish it but could actually ignite or intensify the blaze, creating a psychological weapon as much as a physical one. What's perhaps most impressive is the delivery system. This wasn't simply thrown in pots. It was pressurized and deployed through a complex device called a siphon, a bronze tube that used a pump and a brazier to preheat the mixture before expelling it as a continuous jet of flame. Operators, protected by large, heat-resistant shields, could aim this nozzle like an early flamethrower, sweeping it across the decks of enemy ships. The engineering required to create a portable, pressurized, and safe for the user delivery mechanism for such a volatile substance is a staggering achievement in itself, pointing to a highly advanced understanding of both metallurgy and mechanical engineering. The strategic impact of this invention cannot be overstated. It was the ultimate deterrent during the Arab sieges of Constantinople, first in 673 and again in 718. The Byzantine navy used Greek fire to decisively destroy invading fleets, saving the empire from conquest and preserving a bastion of classical knowledge in Europe. Its existence created an aura of invincibility around the Byzantine fleet. The mere threat of its deployment could cause enemy captains to break formation and retreat in panic. This wasn't just a weapon, it was a tool of psychological warfare and a powerful symbol of imperial technological supremacy, so valuable that its formula was known only to a select few, allegedly even within the royal family, to prevent it from falling into enemy hands. And that is the final, fascinating layer to this story, the birth of organized secrecy around technology. The Byzantines didn't just invent a powerful weapon, they pioneered the concept of a state-controlled military-industrial secret. Knowledge itself was the weapon, and its protection was a matter of national security. This foreshadows our modern world of classified defense projects and patent wars. The ultimate testament to their success is that the precise formula for Greek fire truly did die with them. Despite our best modern efforts to reverse engineer it based on historical texts, we have never been able to perfectly replicate its reported properties. It remains one of history's most powerful and enduring secrets, a blazing reminder that some ancient innovations were so advanced they could not be stolen, only lost. Now, let's turn from the blazing terror of Greek fire to something far more solid and enduring, yet no less revolutionary. Think about the most impressive modern construction projects you know: skyscrapers, vast bridges, monumental dams. We build them with concrete, a material we often assume represents the pinnacle of strength and durability. Yet, if you visit these structures in a few hundred years, many will be crumbling, succumbing to cracks, water damage, and the relentless wear of time. Now journey to Rome and stand beneath the dome of the Pantheon, a structure built nearly 2,000 years ago, still the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome. Or walk along the arches of an ancient Roman aqueduct, still standing strong after millennia. This isn't magic, it's a superior technology, one we are only now beginning to fully understand. Roman concrete didn't just resist time, it seemingly collaborated with it, growing stronger with age. The secret wasn't in some lost super ingredient, but in a brilliantly counterintuitive recipe. Where our modern concrete relies heavily on Portland cement, the Romans used a simple but powerful mix of volcanic ash, lime, and chunks of rock or brick. The true genius, however, lay in their choice of a specific type of volcanic ash, known as pozzolana, found around the Bay of Naples. When this ash mix was combined with seawater, something remarkable happened. Instead of slowly eroding the structure, the seawater triggered a long-term chemical reaction. The salt water would gradually seep into tiny cracks that naturally form in any concrete. But rather than widening those cracks through freeze-thaw cycles or rusting internal steel reinforcements as it would in modern structures, the seawater interacted with the pozzolana and lime to form new minerals, effectively filling the cracks and healing the wound. The concrete possessed a built-in self-healing mechanism. This process is something materials scientists today are desperately trying to replicate. Modern research using advanced electron microscopes and X-ray microdiffraction has revealed the presence of a rare mineral called aluminous tobamorite within the Roman samples. This crystalline structure forms in the lime-rich volcanic mixture as it ages, especially when pounded by the waves in marine environments like harbors. It's a stronger, more stable mineral than the components of modern concrete, and its growth over centuries is what gives Roman concrete its legendary durability. The Romans, of course, didn't know the molecular details of aluminous tobermorite. Their knowledge was empirical, built on centuries of observation and experimentation. They knew that using this particular ash from this particular region, and even using seawater in the mix for marine projects, resulted in an indestructible material. They perfected a formula that worked in perfect harmony with the natural environment, even turning a corrosive element like seawater into a key component of its strength. This challenges a very persistent and condescending myth about the ancient world, that their technological advances were merely happy accidents, the product of simple trial and error without deep understanding. The widespread and consistent use of this concrete formula across the vast Roman Empire, from the shores of Britain to the deserts of North Africa, proves this was no accident. It was standardized, codified knowledge. Vitruvius, a Roman architect and engineer from the 1st century BC, detailed the precise proportions and sources for making concrete in his seminal work, De Architectura. This was applied materials science on an imperial scale. They understood the properties of their local materials intimately and knew how to combine them to achieve a desired, spectacular result. Their concrete wasn't just a building material, it was the physical embodiment of their pragmatic genius, enabling an infrastructure revolution that built an empire and whose bones still shape the landscape of Europe today. While the Romans were mastering the chemistry of concrete to build structures that would stand for millennia, another ancient civilization might have been quietly toying with a force even more fundamental to our modern world: electricity. The story of the Baghdad Battery begins not with a dramatic discovery, but with a modest, unassuming artifact found in the basement of the National Museum of Iraq. In 1936, during excavations at a 2,000-year-old Parthian village near Baghdad, workers uncovered a peculiar object that defied easy classification. It was a small, bright yellow clay jar about the size of a man's fist, with a stopper made of asphalt sealing its top. Inside, nestled within the jar, was a rolled sheet of copper, and suspended down the center of that copper cylinder was a solid iron rod. It looked for all the world like the components of a simple chemical cell. The find was initially catalogued as a curiosity and largely forgotten until Wilhelm Koenig, the director of the museum, took a closer look a few years later. An Austrian archaeologist with an interest in the unusual, Koenig was struck by the object's resemblance to something that shouldn't have existed for another 1,800 years. He proposed a radical theory. This was no ordinary storage jar. If one were to fill it with an acidic liquid, something as common as vinegar or citrus juice, both readily available in the region, the jar, the copper, and the iron would cease to be inert artifacts. They would transform into a basic electrochemical cell. The acidic electrolyte would react with the two different metals, causing electrons to flow from the anode to the cathode, generating a small but measurable electric current. In essence, he suggested the ancient Parthians or Sasanians had created a primitive battery. To test this astonishing hypothesis, modern researchers have built numerous replicas. When filled with grape juice or vinegar, these replicas consistently produce a voltage between 0.8 and 2 volts. It's not a lot of power. You couldn't light a modern bulb with it, but it is unmistakably electricity. The real mystery and the source of intense debate among archaeologists is not if it could generate electricity, but why it was made. What possible use could a 2-volt battery have held for an ancient artisan or healer? One compelling theory points to electroplating. The process of gilding or silvering objects with a thin layer of precious metal using a weak electrical current was known in Mesopotamia. A small battery, perhaps connected in a series to increase its output, could have provided just enough power to facilitate this kind of detailed metalwork, offering a far more controlled method than simple mercury gilding. Another fascinating possibility lies in the realm of ancient medicine. Texts from the classical world describe how physicians would use the electrical charge produced by certain fish, like the torpedo ray, to numb pain and treat ailments. The Greeks called this therapy narc, from which we get the word narcotic. If a living creature could generate a therapeutic shock, why not an artificial device? A battery like this could have been used to deliver a mild, localized jolt for pain relief or to treat inflammation, a form of early electrotherapy that would seem mystical to the patient. The very fact that we have multiple plausible explanations, from the industrial to the medicinal, underscores its profound significance. It wasn't a one-trick gadget. It was a foundational technology whose potential applications we can only guess at. The most tantalizing aspect of the Baghdad Battery isn't its voltage, but the intellectual leap it represents. Its construction reveals a nascent, perhaps even intentional, understanding of basic electrochemical principles, the interaction of different metals in a corrosive solution. Someone 2,000 years ago observed a natural phenomenon and engineered a tool to replicate and harness it. This completely shatters the conventional timeline of electrical discovery, which typically begins with Benjamin Franklin's kite experiment in the 1750s and Alessandro Volta's first true battery in 1800. It suggests that the path of innovation is not a straight line but a complex web with many lost threads. The Baghdad Battery stands as a quiet, humble, yet utterly revolutionary question mark from the past, challenging us to wonder what other sparks of genius have been buried by time, waiting for a curious mind to unearth them. If the Antikythera Mechanism is a window into a lost world of complex machinery, and Greek fire a testament to guarded chemical mastery, then the Phaistos Disc is something else entirely, a locked door. Discovered in the ruins of the Minoan palace of Phaistos on the island of Crete in 1908, this small, fired clay disc, roughly the size of a large dinner plate, presents a mystery that has baffled the brightest minds in linguistics and archaeology for over a century. It's not the material that's extraordinary, but the message meticulously pressed into its surface. On both sides, a continuous spiral of 241 individual symbols winds from the outer edge toward the center. These aren't symbols carved by hand. Each one was stamped into the soft clay with a pre-made seal, a technique that feels startlingly modern. This single object, a product of the Middle Minoan period around 1800 to 1600 before the Common Era, simultaneously demonstrates a technological leap and guards a secret we have yet to crack. The immediate, breathtaking implication of those stamped symbols is the concept of movable type. Think about that for a moment. This disc suggests that someone in the Bronze Age conceived of the idea of creating a set of reusable stamps to impress a message onto a medium, a principle that wouldn't become widespread until Johannes Gutenberg's printing press over 3,000 years later. The maker of the disc had a set of at least 45 distinct seals, each representing a person, an animal, a plant, or a geometric shape. They inked these stamps. There are clear signs of a pigment being used, and then pressed them into the clay in a specific, deliberate sequence before firing the disc to permanence. This was not a one-off piece of art. It was a product of a system, a planned process for reproducing information. The staggering question is whether this was a solitary, ingenious experiment or a glimpse into a broader, lost tradition of Minoan printing that simply hasn't survived on any other perishable material. Naturally, the central, maddening question is, what does it say? The script is unique. It doesn't match any other known writing system from the ancient world, whether the later Linear A and Linear B scripts also found on Crete or any script from Egypt or the Near East. It is a complete isolate. This has led to a century of wildly divergent theories, each more fascinating than the last. Some scholars argue it is a religious text, perhaps a hymn to a Minoan goddess, with the repeating symbols representing a sacred chant or ritual. Others propose it is a legal document, a form of ancient contract or treaty, stamped with official seals to give it authority. There are more imaginative suggestions that it's a board game with the spiral representing the path and the symbols denoting different moves or challenges. Or perhaps it's a geometric proof, a story, or even a list of astronomical observations. Without a Rosetta Stone, a parallel text in a known language, every attempt at decipherment remains speculative. The disk is a linguistic fortress, and its gates remain firmly shut. This profound unknowability is what makes the Phaistos Disc so much more than a curious artifact. It is a powerful symbol of the vast gaps in our understanding of the ancient world. We tend to frame history around what has survived: the stone monuments, the durable metals, the pottery sherds. But the Phaistos Disc hints at an entire universe of perishable innovation that has simply vanished. If they were stamping messages onto clay, what were they printing onto? Papyrus, leather, bark cloth. How widespread was this technology? Was the disc itself a unique prestige object, or was it a common form of record-keeping that we've only found one example of? It forces us to confront the sobering reality that for every enduring marvel like the pyramids, there were likely countless other intellectual and technological achievements crafted from materials that returned to dust, leaving behind only cryptic echoes like this one clay disc. It is a humbling reminder that the past is not a puzzle we are close to solving, but a deep ocean of which we have only seen the surface. While we often picture the blazing sands and towering pyramids of ancient Egypt, we rarely imagine the delicate, shimmering beauty of glassware being crafted in a workshop along the Nile. Yet, around 1500 years before the Common Era, Egyptian artisans were not just working with glass, they were mastering it, transforming humble sand and minerals into objects of breathtaking color and complexity that would not look out of place in a modern art gallery. This wasn't the crude, bubbly glass of later medieval times. This was a material science of stunning sophistication, born from a deep, empirical understanding of chemistry and heat that rivals our own. Their creations reveal a society that valued beauty and innovation in equal measure, pushing the boundaries of what was possible with fire and earth. The most common technique they perfected was known as core forming, a process that required immense skill and patience. It began with a core, a shaped lump of clay and dung attached to a metal rod. The artisan would then heat this core and repeatedly dip it or roll it in a molten, syrupy mixture of silica, crushed quartz, sand, soda ash as a flux to lower the melting point, and lime to stabilize the glass. This built up layer upon layer of glass onto the core, but the true magic happened next. While the glass was still pliable, the craftsman would trail threads of differently colored molten glass onto the surface, and then use a sharp tool to drag and marver these threads, creating intricate feather, wave, and zigzag patterns that were permanently fused into the body of the vessel. Once the piece had cooled, the inner clay core was painstakingly scraped out, leaving behind a hollow, brilliantly decorated vessel. the level of control required to manage the different viscosities and melting points of the various colored glasses, all without the aid of precise temperature gauges, is a testament to their unparalleled artistry and experience. The vibrancy of their palette is perhaps their most enduring chemical legacy. They discovered that by adding specific metal oxides to the melt, they could produce an astonishing range of permanent, jewel-like colors. Cobalt, carefully processed from ores, yielded a deep, rich lapis lazuli blue that became synonymous with luxury and the divine. Copper could produce a range of hues, from a translucent turquoise to an opaque red, depending on the furnace atmosphere. They even created an opaque white glass that perfectly mimicked the appearance of precious Egyptian faience, using tin or lead antimonite. This wasn't mere guesswork, it was applied chemistry. They understood that the same mineral could produce different colors under different conditions, manipulating the oxygen levels in their furnaces to achieve the desired result. This knowledge was so advanced that the specific cobalt signature used in Egyptian glass has become a fingerprint for archaeologists, allowing them to trace the trade routes of these precious objects across the ancient world. Beyond beautiful bottles and beads, this mastery of glass had profound practical and symbolic applications. Glass amulets in the shape of deities or protective symbols were woven into the net cloaks of mummies, their colors believed to hold magical properties to safeguard the soul in the afterlife. Small glass vessels held precious perfumes, unguents, and cosmetics, their impermeable nature preserving these valuable substances far better than porous pottery. The famous blue and yellow striped glass headrest found in Tutankhamun's tomb is a masterpiece of both art and engineering, designed to support the pharaoh's head in comfort for eternity. In Egyptian cosmology, the very substance of glass held symbolic power. Its translucency and ability to capture light mirrored the primordial waters of Nun and the life-giving rays of the sun god Ra. Their innovation was not a separate pursuit from their spirituality or daily life. It was completely interwoven, demonstrating that for the ancient Egyptians, the quest to manipulate and beautify their world was a holistic endeavor, blending the lines between laboratory, workshop, and temple. Standing in the courtyard of the Qutb Minar complex in Delhi, surrounded by the ruins of ancient empires, is a singular object that seems to defy the most relentless force of nature, time itself. The Iron Pillar of Delhi rises over 7 meters into the air, a solid, seamless shaft of wrought iron weighing more than 6 tons. It was erected around 1600 years ago, likely during the reign of the Gupta Emperor Chandragupta II, and it bears an inscription praising a king named Chandra, celebrated for his conquests across the Indian subcontinent. But its true conquest is not recorded in its Sanskrit verses. Its true victory is over corrosion. For over a millennium and a half, through scorching heat, torrential monsoon rains, and relentless humidity, this pillar has not rusted. It stands today with a smooth, dark, metallic luster, a timeless sentinel that has outlasted every dynasty and structure built around it, silently challenging our modern assumptions about the supposed primitiveness of ancient metalworking. The pillar's resilience isn't a result of magic or some unknown super metal, but a breathtakingly sophisticated understanding of chemistry and metallurgy that was almost certainly intentional. Modern metallurgists armed with spectroscopes and electron microscopes have dissected its secret. The iron itself is remarkably pure, with a very low carbon content, indicating a mastery of the forge that allowed ancient smiths to process large quantities of iron without introducing the brittleness that comes from excess carbon. But the real genius lies in its unique chemical cocktail. The iron contains a high percentage of phosphorus, around 0.25%, a level significantly higher than what is found in modern steels. This was not a contaminant, it was a crucial ingredient, during the forging process, where immense heat and repeated hammering welded smaller pieces of iron together into this massive monolith, the high phosphorus content prevented the formation of large slag inclusions, creating a more homogeneous and stable metal. The most critical reaction, however, happens on the surface. When the pillar is exposed to the moisture and oxygen in the air, a thin, protective film forms on the metal. This is not the flaky, unstable rust we are familiar with that continually eats away at the metal beneath. Instead, this is a stable, protective layer of crystalline iron hydrogen phosphate hydrate, a mere 50 to 600 microns thick, thinner than a sheet of paper. This passive film acts as an invisible, self-renewing shield. If the surface is scratched or damaged, the unique chemical environment, driven by that high phosphorus content, simply reforms the protective layer, healing the wound. It's a self-preserving system engineered into the very alloy itself. Modern stainless steel, by comparison, relies on the addition of chromium to achieve a similar passive layer, a principle we only developed in the 20th century. The ancient Indian smiths achieved a comparable result over 15 centuries earlier using a completely different, and in some ways more elegant, chemical pathway. This leads to a profound and humbling question. Did they know what they were doing? Was this rust-resistant property a deliberate invention or an incredibly fortunate accident? The evidence strongly suggests intention. The consistent high phosphorus content points to a specific and controlled process. The iron was likely smelted using a particular type of ore and a specific recipe for the charcoal fuel, both of which could have been rich in phosphorus compounds. The smiths would have observed that iron processed in this way behaved differently. It was easier to forge, weld into large objects, and crucially, it did not corrode like other iron. They perfected a formula through meticulous observation and passed this tacit knowledge down through generations of metalworkers. This was materials science in its most practical, applied form. They may not have understood the molecular mechanics of passive film formation, but they absolutely understood the cause and effect. This specific process resulted in a superior, enduring metal. The pillar's very existence shatters the stereotype of ancient technology as merely functional and transient. It was a monumental achievement in every sense, a testament to the logistical prowess required to forge and raise a 6-ton object, and a symbol of a king's power intended to last for eternity. But beyond its symbolic purpose, it stands as a direct challenge to our linear narrative of progress. We often assume that our corrosion-resistant alloys are a purely modern triumph. The Iron Pillar of Delhi forces us to reconsider, presenting tangible, irrefutable proof that ancient innovators could not only match nature's challenges, but could engineer solutions so effective that they remain a subject of intense scientific study today. It is a quiet, stoic masterpiece of empirical science, a monument not just to a king, but to the anonymous genius of the artisans whose knowledge of the elements was so profound that it literally became etched in iron. Now, let's shift our perspective from the intimate chemistry of metals to a canvas of truly epic proportions. High above the arid plains of southern Peru, the true scale of human ambition comes into breathtaking focus. Etched into the dark, sun-baked desert pavement are hundreds of immense figures. A hummingbird with wings outstretched, a spider with perfectly articulated legs, a monkey with an intricately coiled tail, and vast, precise geometric shapes that stretch for miles across the plateau. These are the Nazca lines, and their existence poses a question that has captivated and confounded observers for nearly a century. How, and more importantly why, did a people living over 2,000 years ago create art on a scale so immense it can only be fully appreciated from the heavens? The sheer logistics of their construction boggle the mind. Created by the Nazca culture between 500 BCE and 500 CE, these geoglyphs were not built but subtracted. The artists carefully removed the top layer of dark, iron oxide-coated pebbles to reveal the lighter, sandy soil beneath. This simple technique created a stark contrast, but the execution was anything but simple. To create a single, continuous line that runs perfectly straight for over 5 miles across rugged, uneven terrain requires more than just artistic vision. It demands sophisticated surveying and engineering. The prevailing theory is that they scaled up small-scale models using a system of grids and ropes. They would have laid out a master pattern using stakes and cords, perhaps using a central axis point to maintain proportions as teams of workers meticulously cleared the stones along the designated path. The precision is staggering. Many of the long straight lines deviate by less than a few meters over their entire length, a feat of accuracy that would be challenging even with modern laser levels and GPS, let alone with simple wooden stakes and human sightlines. This leads to the most persistent and tantalizing mystery. What was their purpose? Since their discovery by modern archaeologists in the 1920s, a host of theories have been proposed, each reflecting the zeitgeist of its time. One of the earliest and most enduring ideas is that they served a profound astronomical function, acting as a giant celestial calendar. Certain lines do align with the solstice sun or significant stars, but this explanation fails to account for the vast majority of the animal and plant figures. Another theory suggests they were sacred pathways, walked by priests during water seeking rituals in this desperately dry region. The act of walking the lines may have been a form of prayer to deities associated with fertility and rain. A more recent and compelling hypothesis connects them directly to the lifeblood of the desert, water. Geological surveys have shown that many of the largest figures are positioned directly over underground aquifers and fissures. The lines and shapes might have been a massive map of the subterranean water network, or perhaps part of a ritual designed to thank or invoke the spirits that controlled this most precious resource. Perhaps the most profound aspect of the Nazca lines is what they reveal about the society that created them. This was not the work of a lone visionary or a small group. It was a coordinated, centuries-long project that required a centralized authority, a shared cultural vision, and a highly organized labor force. The stability to plan and execute such long-term projects indicates a complex, stratified society with specialized roles: artists who designed, engineers who surveyed, and a large population that contributed to the construction, likely as part of their religious or civic duty. The lines were a communal act of faith and identity, etched into the very landscape they depended on. They are a testament to the human desire to make a mark, to communicate something of immense importance on the grandest possible scale. Their message, intended for their gods or for themselves, remains just beyond our reach, a silent, magnificent puzzle that continues to challenge our understanding of ancient ingenuity and the timeless human need to connect with forces greater than ourselves. While the Nazca people were etching their immense messages into the desert floor on the other side of the world, a Chinese scholar was grappling with a far more urgent and terrifying natural phenomenon. In 132 of the Common Era, the brilliant inventor and royal astronomer Zhang Heng presented the Han court with a device that must have seemed like something from the realm of magic: a large, ornate bronze urn, adorned with 8 dragons snaking down its sides, each one gazing down at a corresponding bronze toad with its mouth open wide. To the untrained eye, it was a magnificent sculpture, but this was in fact the world's first seismoscope, an instrument designed not just to sense the Earth's tremors, but to point toward their origin from hundreds of miles away. In an era when an earthquake was often seen as a divine omen or a celestial punishment, Zhang Heng's invention introduced something radical: a mechanical, rational explanation and a tool for measured response. The sheer ingenuity of its internal mechanism, deduced from historical texts and modern reconstructions, is what truly stuns. Inside the vessel, a carefully balanced inverted pendulum was suspended. Think of it like a large, weighted stick delicately poised in the center. When seismic waves from a distant quake radiated outwards and reached the instrument, the ground would tremble ever so slightly. This motion would cause the pendulum to swing, but crucially, it would swing most strongly in the direction of the earthquake's epicenter. This movement would then trigger a cleverly designed lever system inside. The lever would dislodge a small metal ball held in the mouth of the dragon facing the direction of the tremor. The ball would drop with an audible clang directly into the waiting mouth of the bronze toad below, providing both a visual and auditory signal. The specific toad that caught the ball instantly told observers the cardinal direction from which the quake had come. The historical record confirms this was no mere theoretical curiosity. It was a highly effective early warning system. The most famous account describes an occasion when a ball dropped from the west-facing dragon, yet no tremors were felt by anyone in the capital city of Luoyang. Skeptics dismissed the device as a failure until days later. A messenger arrived from a village hundreds of miles to the west, reporting a devastating earthquake that had struck at the exact moment the dragon had released its ball. The device had detected vibrations far too subtle for human senses, accurately pinpointing the disaster's direction long before any physical news could travel. This event reportedly silenced the court skeptics and cemented the seismoscope's reputation as an invaluable tool for the empire. Heng's creation represents a monumental leap in thought. It embodies a shift from superstitious fear to systematic observation, from attributing natural disasters to angry gods to understanding them as physical phenomena that could be measured, tracked, and prepared for. This was the birth of seismology. The emperor now had a tool that could provide critical information, allowing him to swiftly dispatch aid and troops to the affected region, assess damage for tax relief, and maintain stability by demonstrating the court's apparent omniscience and control over natural events. It was as much a political and administrative tool as it was a scientific one, showcasing a sophisticated approach to disaster management and imperial governance that was centuries ahead of its time. What makes this invention so profoundly humbling is the sheer isolation of its brilliance. This was not an idea that was incrementally improved upon over generations in China, and it would be over 1,500 years before the first modern seismographs would be developed in Europe. Heng's seismoscope stands as a lone, towering peak of genius, a testament to one individual's ability to observe the world, understand its hidden mechanics, and engineer a solution that would not be rivaled for millennia. It reminds us that the spark of scientific inquiry has flickered brightly throughout human history, often in places and times we least expect, forever challenging our assumptions about the linear progression of knowledge. Now, let's journey from the stable, earthbound ingenuity of the Chinese seismoscope to the vast, trackless expanse of the North Atlantic, where another ancient people faced a navigational challenge that would daunt even modern sailors. For the Vikings, the open ocean was not a barrier but a highway, and their legendary longships carried them from the fjords of Scandinavia to the shores of North America centuries before Columbus. But how did they achieve such feats of navigation without a magnetic compass, often under overcast skies that hid the sun and stars for days on end? The answer may lie in a mysterious object mentioned in their sagas, the solarstein or sunstone, a crystal that could reveal the sun's position even when it was completely obscured by cloud or fog. This wasn't magic, it was a breathtaking application of optical physics, a natural technology that turned the very sky itself into a navigational instrument. The principle behind the sunstone is a phenomenon known as polarization. Sunlight, as it travels through the atmosphere, becomes scattered and polarized, meaning its light waves vibrate in a specific direction relative to the sun's position. Our human eyes cannot perceive this polarization pattern, but certain transparent crystals can. When you look through a crystal of Iceland spar, a form of calcite that the Vikings had access to through trade, the crystal splits the light into two separate beams due to its unique refractive properties. By rotating the crystal and observing the changing intensity of these twin beams, a skilled navigator could locate the point where the two images are of equal brightness. This alignment points directly to the hidden sun's location in the sky with a surprising degree of accuracy, providing a reliable celestial bearing even at dawn, dusk, or on completely overcast days. For a long time, this idea was relegated to the realm of intriguing myth, a clever plot device from the sagas rather than a documented historical tool. That changed when a team of researchers decided to put the theory to the test using the rigorous methods of experimental archaeology. They built a replica Viking ship and, using only a calcite sunstone and their knowledge of the technique, attempted to navigate under overcast conditions. The results were startlingly successful. Even when the sun was completely invisible, the sunstone allowed them to determine its position within a few degrees of accuracy, more than enough to maintain a steady east-west course across the ocean. This simple crystal effectively gave the Vikings a backup GPS system, a way to check their course when their primary methods, like reading the sun's shadow on a sundial, were unavailable. This invention reveals a layer of Viking society that often gets overshadowed by their reputation as raiders and warriors, their profound sophistication as explorers and scientists. Their mastery of the sea was not born of reckless daring alone, but of meticulous observation and a deep, empirical understanding of their natural world. They understood the migratory patterns of whales and birds, they could read the subtle shifts in wave patterns and watercolor, and they possessed an oral tradition of sailing directions so precise it could guide a ship from Norway to Greenland. The sunstone was the technological pinnacle of this system, a tool that leveraged a subtle property of light itself. It represents a perfect fusion of intuitive knowledge and practical innovation, allowing them to transform a simple piece of crystal into a key that unlocked the secrets of the sky. The true legacy of the Viking sunstone is that it reframes our entire understanding of their exploration. It wasn't a series of accidental discoveries made by ships blown off course. It was a calculated, repeatable process of expansion enabled by reliable technology. This tiny crystal helps explain how they could consistently find and colonize far-flung islands like Iceland, Greenland, and even the coast of Newfoundland, establishing trade routes that stretched across thousands of miles of unpredictable ocean. It stands as a powerful symbol of human ingenuity, demonstrating that the most advanced technology isn't always the most complex. Sometimes it's the ability to see the world differently, to recognize a hidden pattern in nature, and to have the wisdom to hold it in your hand and let it guide you home. But centuries before the Vikings used crystals to navigate the seas, in the vibrant intellectual hub of Alexandria, a different kind of genius was at play, one that was harnessing the very element of change itself, steam. In the 1st century of the Common Era, the engineer and mathematician Heron, also known as Hero of Alexandria, described a device in his work Pneumatica that feels like it was teleported from a much later age. He called it an Eolipile, named after Aeolus, the keeper of the winds. At first glance, it seems deceptively simple. A sealed cauldron of water is heated over a fire, and from it, 2 pipes rise to support a hollow sphere that can rotate freely. The sphere itself has two L-shaped nozzles protruding from opposite sides, bent to face in opposite directions. When the water boils, steam rushes up through the pipes, fills the sphere, and is forced out at high pressure through the two nozzles. According to Newton's third law, which wouldn't be formally stated for another 1700 years, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. The force of the steam jetting out one way causes the sphere to spin rapidly in the other. It was, without any doubt, the world's first recorded steam engine, a primitive but perfectly functional reaction turbine. The sheer brilliance of Heron's device lies in its elegant demonstration of fundamental principles. He wasn't just making a novelty, he was proving a concept. The Eolipile is a working model of the conversion of thermal energy into mechanical motion. The heat from the fire transfers energy to the water, transforming it into high-pressure steam, and that pressurized gas's desire to expand is channeled and directed to produce rotational force. This is the foundational concept behind every steam turbine that generates a significant portion of the world's electricity today. Heron had stumbled upon the core idea of the Industrial Revolution while the Roman Empire was still at its peak. He understood the mechanics so well that he even described how the sphere's speed could be controlled by adjusting the size of the nozzles and the intensity of the heat, a basic form of engineering feedback and control that is essential to all modern machinery. This was no isolated flash of insight. Heron's workshop was a veritable factory of automation and wonder. He created a fully automated, coin-operated holy water dispenser for temples, arguably the first vending machine. He designed a self-trimming lamp that used a floating valve to maintain a constant oil level. He built mechanical puppet shows powered by weights, ropes, and steam that could tell entire stories without human intervention. And he engineered a magical temple door opener where lighting a fire on an altar would use heated air pressure to make the doors swing open, astonishing worshippers. Heron wasn't just an inventor, he was a master of pneumatics and hydraulics, a showman who used engineering to create wonder and seemingly divine spectacle. His work reveals a culture in Alexandria that was intensely curious about the laws of physics and eager to push them to their limits for both practical application and pure theatrical delight. And this is where the story of the Eolipile becomes one of history's most tantalizing what-if scenarios, with the core principles of steam power clearly demonstrated and understood. Why didn't the ancient world launch its own industrial revolution? The answer is not a lack of intelligence, but a combination of social and economic factors. The Roman economy was built on abundant slave labor. There was simply no pressing economic incentive to develop labor-saving machinery on an industrial scale. Human power was cheap and readily available. Furthermore, the metallurgy of the time, while advanced for crafting statues and armor, may not have been precise or strong enough to contain the high pressures needed for larger, more powerful steam engines that could do meaningful work. Heron's device remained a fascinating curiosity, a temple wonder, perhaps used to mystify worshippers or as a philosophical teaching tool, but it was never connected to a wheel, a pump, or a loom. This disconnect between invention and application is a powerful reminder that technology does not evolve in a vacuum. It requires a society ready to receive it, an economy that demands it, and a culture that encourages its practical development. The Eolipile was a seed of immense potential that fell on stony ground. It would lie dormant for centuries until a changing world with different needs, a world beginning to feel the constraints of human and animal power, would rediscover the principle and cultivate it into an engine that would reshape the planet. Heron's spinning sphere challenges our linear view of progress. It proves that the potential for transformative change can exist long before the conditions are right to embrace it. and it forever leaves us wondering about the other brilliant seeds from the ancient world that we have yet to unearth, seeds that might still hold dormant power waiting for the right moment to sprout. High in the Andes, where the mountains meet the clouds, the Inca Empire forged an architectural legacy that seems to defy both physics and time. Their structures were not merely built, they were woven into the very fabric of the landscape with a precision that remains almost incomprehensible. At sites like Sacsayhuaman, a fortress overlooking Cusco, you can see walls composed of colossal stones, some weighing over 100 tons, fitted together in a dizzying, zigzagging jigsaw puzzle. The joints between these behemoths are so meticulously crafted that you cannot force a single piece of paper, let alone a knife blade, into the seams. This wasn't just impressive craftsmanship. It was a radical approach to construction that modern engineers are still working to fully understand, a system where the wall itself was the ultimate shock absorber. The common assumption is that achieving such perfection must have required advanced, perhaps even lost, technology. The reality, however, is far more fascinating. The Inca stonemasons almost certainly used tools that appear deceptively simple. Hammer stones made of harder rock like diorite or quartzite to pound and shape the granite and limestone, bronze chisels, and abrasive sand to grind and polish surfaces. Their true technology wasn't in complex machinery, but in an unparalleled, accumulated knowledge of geology and geometry. They understood the natural cleavage planes of different rock types, knowing exactly where and how to strike a boulder to split it along its natural weaknesses. They would then painstakingly shape each block by repeatedly fitting it against its neighbors, slowly removing minute amounts of material until the fit was perfect. This process, known as ashlar masonry, was a testament to almost superhuman patience and skill, where a single wall could represent generations of labor and refined technique. This extraordinary method served a purpose far beyond creating visually stunning walls. The Andes is one of the most seismically active regions on Earth, and Inca structures have withstood centuries of powerful earthquakes that have flattened modern buildings. The secret to their resilience lies in their brilliant design. Unlike a rigid, mortar-bound wall that would crack and crumble under seismic stress, an Inca wall is a dynamic system. Each stone is slightly convex on its outer face and concave where it meets its neighbor, creating a complex interlocking pattern. When an earthquake strikes, the stones in an Inca wall actually dance. They shift and settle slightly against one another, absorbing and dissipating the tremendous energy. When the shaking stops, they simply settle back into a new, equally stable position. They are designed to move, to breathe with the mountain, a principle of flexible engineering that we are only now incorporating into modern seismic-resistant designs. But to view this stonework as merely an engineering triumph is to miss half of its story. For the Inca, architecture was deeply intertwined with cosmology and their reverence for the natural world. The rocks themselves were considered living entities, imbued with a spirit called a huaca. The act of construction was not one of domination over nature, but of collaboration with it. Many walls incorporate existing bedrock outcrops seamlessly into their design, and stones were often shaped to mimic the contours of the surrounding mountain peaks. This wasn't just pragmatic, it was a spiritual statement, a way of anchoring their sacred sites to the eternal power of the earth. Furthermore, the alignment of certain walls and structures at places like Machu Picchu and Ollantaytambo reveals a sophisticated understanding of astronomy, marking solstices, equinoxes, and celestial events with breathtaking accuracy. The stones were a calendar, a temple, and a fortress all in one. The lasting impression of Inca stonework is one of profound harmony. It represents a philosophy where utility, artistry, spirituality, and environmental science were not separate disciplines but different facets of the same unified worldview. They didn't seek to conquer their environment with brute force or complex machinery. Instead, they listened to it, learned from it, and developed a language of construction that spoke in perfect dialogue with the earth itself. In an age often defined by its disposable structures and confrontational relationship with nature, these silent, steadfast walls stand as a timeless lesson in resilience, patience, and the incredible things humans can achieve when they choose to work in concert with the world around them. While the Inca were mastering the harmony of stone and earth, a very different kind of precision was being perfected in ancient India, one that dealt not with rock, but with the delicate and living canvas of the human body. The horrors of ancient warfare were not just the clash of armies but the lasting disfigurements left behind. A slashed nose, a severed ear, or a torn lip could brand a soldier, priest, or merchant as an outcast for life, shunned from society and religious ceremonies. It was from this profound human need for restoration, not mere vanity, that one of history's most astonishing medical revolutions was born. In the bustling intellectual centers of ancient India, around 600 years before the Common Era, a physician named Sushruta composed a text that would lay the foundation for the entire field of surgery, detailing procedures of such complexity and insight that they would not be matched in the West for centuries to come. This text, the Sushruta Samhita, is far more than a simple medical manual. It is a comprehensive encyclopedia of surgical knowledge that reads with a startlingly modern sense of scientific rigor. Sushruta didn't just describe surgeries, he laid out a complete system of medical education. He insisted that aspiring surgeons must first learn their craft on inanimate objects, practicing incisions on vegetables like watermelons and cucumbers, and probing on the delicate tissues of flowers before ever touching a living patient. He emphasized the critical importance of anatomy, advocating for the dissection of human cadavers to understand the inner workings of the body, a practice that was taboo in many other contemporary cultures and wouldn't become standard in Europe for over 2,000 years. His text meticulously classifies different types of instruments, surgical procedures, and even the varieties of bodily tissues, demonstrating a systematic approach to medicine that was unparalleled in the ancient world. The crown jewel of Sushruta's work, and the procedure that most vividly captures his genius, is rhinoplasty, the surgical reconstruction of a nose. His method, now famously known as the Indian method, was a stroke of breathtaking ingenuity. The patient would be sedated with wine or other herbal intoxicants. Then, Sushruta would take a leaf, often from a creeper plant, and place it on the patient's cheek to measure the size of the new nose to be fashioned. Using this leaf as a template, he would carefully cut and elevate a flap of skin from the patient's forehead or cheek, making sure it remained attached by a pedicle, a thin stalk of tissue, to ensure a continuous blood supply, a concept vital to the graft's survival that modern surgeons call vascularization. This living flap was then twisted upside down and meticulously sutured into place on the damaged nasal stump. To maintain the airway during healing, 2 polished wooden tubes were inserted into the nostrils. The result was a functional, living nose sculpted from the patient's own flesh, a procedure so successful that its core principles are still used in reconstructive plastic surgery today. But the sophistication didn't end with technique. The Sushruta Samhita reveals a profound understanding of the body's response to trauma and the conditions necessary for healing. Sushruta provided detailed post-operative care instructions, prescribing medicated oils and ghee to keep the wound supple and prevent infection, and specific diets to aid recovery. He classified different types of wounds and infections, and his descriptions of surgical instruments, over 125, are detailed, show an obsession with precision, from various types of forceps and scalpels to probes, needles, and specula. This speaks to a culture that had not only mastered the art of surgery, but had developed the metallurgy to create the fine, sharp, and sterile tools required to perform it. The entire process, from pre-operative preparation to post-operative care, reflects a holistic understanding of medicine that integrated the physical, physiological, and psychological well-being of the patient. The enduring legacy of Sushruta's work is a powerful counter-narrative to the traditional history of medicine, which often centers on Greek figures like Hippocrates. While the Hippocratic Oath is rightly celebrated for its ethical framework, the Sushruta Samhita provides the practical, technical manual for complex intervention that Greek medicine largely lacked. Knowledge of these Indian surgical techniques traveled west centuries later, carried by traders and physicians, eventually influencing Arabic and European medical practices. Sushruta's work forces us to completely reimagine the landscape of ancient science. It presents a picture of a society where empirical observation, bold experimentation, and profound compassion converged to produce a medical system that sought not just to heal, but to restore, to give a person back their face, their dignity, and their place in the world, with a skill that would not be seen again for generations. After marveling at the surgical precision of ancient India, we now turn to an object that seems to defy the very nature of light itself, a masterpiece of Roman artistry that holds a secret not understood for over a millennium. In the quiet halls of the British Museum sits a small, fragile glass cup standing just over 6 inches tall. It depicts a scene from mythology, the ill-fated King Lycurgus, entangled in vines for his defiance of the god Dionysus. To the casual observer, it is a remarkable but static relic, but bring a light source close and the cup performs a magic trick. When light shines onto the cup from the front, reflecting off its surface, it glows a serene, opaque jade green. Yet when a light is placed inside it, allowing light to transmit through the glass, the entire vessel undergoes a breathtaking transformation, blazing a deep, translucent ruby red. This is the Lycurgus cup, and its color-changing property isn't magic. It's a stunning, accidental foray into a technology we now call nanotechnology. The secret to this dichroic effect, a term meaning two-colored, lies not in dyes or paints, but in the very molecular structure of the glass itself. Roman glassmakers, in their quest for vibrant colors, were master alchemists of earth and fire. To create this specific cup, they added a very precise and very unusual mixture of precious metals to the molten glass batch. They infused it with minute amounts of gold and silver dust, grinding the metals into a fine powder. But this alone wouldn't create the color change. The true miracle was in the size of these metal particles. Through a process of repeated heating and cooling, the metals formed into tiny, crystalline nanoparticles, each one measuring about 70 nanometers in diameter. That's roughly 1,000 times smaller than the width of a human hair. The Romans, of course, had no concept of a nanometer, but through generations of empirical experimentation, they had perfected a recipe that consistently produced this effect. They were manipulating matter at a scale invisible to them, achieving through craft what we now achieve with electron microscopes and precision engineering. The physics behind this phenomenon is where the true genius, however unintentional, reveals itself. The nanoparticles of gold and silver embedded in the glass matrix interact with light in a very specific way due to their tiny size, a principle known as surface plasmon resonance. In simple terms, when light hits these tiny metal particles, it makes the electrons on their surface vibrate or resonate. The color we perceive depends on the direction of the light and the size and shape of these particles. The silver particles primarily scatter light, which is why we see a greenish hue in reflected light. The gold particles, on the other hand, are tuned to absorb and then re-emit light in the green-blue part of the spectrum, allowing the complementary color, a rich red, to dominate when light passes directly through the glass. The Roman artisans had, through sheer trial and error, engineered a colloidal suspension of metal in glass that acted as a sophisticated optical filter. They were playing with light at a quantum level without ever knowing it. This was not an isolated experiment. While the Lycurgus cup is the most complete and famous example, fragments of similar dichroic glass have been found elsewhere in the Roman world, suggesting this was a known, if exceedingly rare and expensive, technique. The creation of such a piece would have been the pinnacle of the glassmaker's art, requiring an almost supernatural level of control over the furnace's temperature and the cooling process. One slight miscalculation in the heat, and the metal particles would either fail to form or would clump together too large, completely destroying the desired effect. The cup, therefore, represents not just a chemical achievement but a monumental feat of precise thermal engineering, a testament to a master craftsperson's intimate, intuitive relationship with their materials. It was likely a prestige object of immense value, a conversation piece for the ultra-wealthy that demonstrated not only the owner's wealth but also the seemingly magical prowess of Roman industry. The legacy of the Lycurgus cup is a profound lesson in the history of science. It stands as a brilliant counterpoint to the idea that innovation must always be preceded by theoretical understanding. The Roman glassmakers didn't need to understand quantum mechanics to achieve their result. They needed meticulous observation, a willingness to experiment with expensive materials, and a tradition of knowledge passed down from master to apprentice. They knew that if you combined this specific amount of gold and silver dust with this type of glass and heated it in this particular way, you would get a mesmerizing color-changing effect. The why was irrelevant, the how was everything. In that sense, the cup is a beautiful bridge between art and science, between the empirical craftsmanship of the ancient world and the analytical science of our own. It reminds us that some of the most advanced technologies in history were born not in a laboratory, but in a workshop, forged by the curiosity and skill of artists who, in their pursuit of beauty, accidentally unlocked the secrets of the universe. Now, let's journey from the nanoscale artistry of Roman glass to a structure of breathtaking simplicity and scale, one that allowed an entire civilization to defy the logic of the desert itself. Imagine the heart of the Persian Empire under a blistering sun where daytime temperatures could soar to unbearable heights. In this landscape, the idea of ice would seem like a fantastical dream, a luxury reserved for mountain peaks or myth. Yet, ancient Persians didn't just dream of ice. They manufactured and stored it in the middle of the desert, in structures so effective they could preserve food and provide cooling for months on end. This was made possible by the Yakchul, a masterpiece of passive cooling that stands as a testament to a profound, almost intuitive understanding of physics and environmental harmony. The Yakchul, which translates literally to ice pit, was far more than a simple storage cellar. It was a sophisticated architectural system designed as a giant thermodynamic engine, harnessing the very elements that made the desert harsh to create a refuge from them. A typical Yakchul consisted of a large, massive domed structure above ground, often made from a special heat-resistant mortar called saruj, a mixture of sand, clay, egg whites, lime, goat hair, and ash that was not only an exceptional insulator but also incredibly strong. This dome could soar up to 60 feet high, but the true magic lay beneath it. Below the dome was a massive underground storage space, often descending deep into the earth where the ice and food were kept. The entire structure was often positioned strategically to take advantage of prevailing winds and proximity to a kanat, which was an underground aqueduct channeling cold water from distant mountain aquifers. The process of actually making the ice is where the true genius reveals itself. It wasn't about keeping heat out, it was about actively pulling it away. During the frigid desert nights, especially in winter, water was channeled from the kanat into shallow, walled irrigation trenches that ran adjacent to the yakchul. As the still, cold night air settled over these shallow pools, a remarkable phenomenon occurred. The desert sky, clear and dry, acts as a massive heat sink. The water in the trenches, through the principle of radiative cooling, would lose its heat energy upwards into the night sky, often cooling several degrees below the ambient air temperature. This could cause the water to freeze, even if the air temperature was just a few degrees above freezing. By morning, thin sheets of ice would have formed. Workers would harvest this ice and transport it down into the deep, insulated storage chamber of the yakchul, where it was packed in layers with more insulating straw or sawdust. But the system didn't stop working once the ice was stored. The design incorporated another brilliant feature, a wind catcher or badger. This was a tower designed to catch even the faintest breeze and funnel it down into the depths of the storage chamber. As the air descended, it was cooled by the massive ice reservoir below. This now chilled air would then circulate through the storage space, maintaining a consistently low temperature and preventing the ice from melting before exiting through another opening, often on the opposite side. This created a continuous, self-sustaining cycle of convection that required zero energy input beyond the initial design. It was a perfectly balanced ecosystem of cooling, a natural refrigerator powered entirely by the sun, the wind, and the sky. The impact of this technology on Persian society was immense. It wasn't just a tool for luxury, it was a cornerstone of public health, trade, and gastronomy. It allowed for the preservation of food, reducing waste and preventing disease. It enabled the creation of chilled delicacies like falude, a refreshing frozen dessert. Perhaps most importantly, it provided a reliable source of cold water and a cool respite from the heat, a communal benefit that supported daily life and commerce in some of the world's most challenging climates. The yakchul represents a philosophy of design that is desperately relevant today, sustainability through symbiosis. Instead of fighting their environment with massive energy consumption, the ancient Persians learned to listen to it, to understand its rhythms, and to design solutions that worked in graceful partnership with the natural world. They didn't see the desert as an adversary to be conquered with technology, but as a partner whose secrets, once understood, could provide everything they needed to not just survive, but to thrive. From the cool, passive ingenuity of the Persian yakchul, we now turn to the blazing forges of the ancient world, where fire and iron were mastered to create a material of legend. Imagine a warrior in the medieval Islamic world, drawing a sword that seems to flow like water. Its surface is not a flat, polished steel, but a mesmerizing landscape of swirling, rippling patterns, like a wood grain etched in metal. This was no mere decoration. It was the signature of a material so superior that it became the stuff of myth. In the hands of a skilled fighter, this blade was said to be able to slice through a falling silk scarf, yet remain flexible enough to bend from hilt to tip without breaking. This was Damascus steel, a pinnacle of ancient metallurgy whose secrets were so complex that they were eventually lost to time, leaving modern scientists to play a centuries-long game of historical and scientific detective. The name itself is a bit of a historical shortcut. derived from the Syrian city of Damascus, a major trading hub where these legendary blades from various production centers were sold to European crusaders, who encountered them to their terror and awe. The true origin of the technology, however, lies further east in the workshops of India and Sri Lanka. There, for centuries before the Common Era, metalworkers produced a unique type of high-carbon steel known as Wootz steel. This was the raw material, the essential ingredient for true Damascus blades. Wootz was created in small, closed crucibles. Iron was melted together with specific carbon-rich materials, often charcoal and select leaves, in a sealed clay pot. This slow, controlled process allowed the carbon to dissolve evenly into the iron, creating a steel ingot that was peppered with microscopic structures called carbide bands. These ingots, often resembling a small, flat cake, were then traded across the ancient world, making their way to master smiths in Persia and the Middle East who possessed the next piece of the puzzle. This is where the true artistry began. The Wootz ingot was not simply hammered into shape. The master smith would carefully heat it to a precise, bright yellow-orange glow, a temperature that was judged solely by the experienced human eye. Then, with rhythmic, controlled hammer blows, they would forge the ingot into a blade. This was not a straightforward process. The smith would repeatedly heat, fold, and weld the metal, not dozens, but potentially hundreds of times. With each fold, the internal microstructure of the steel was being manipulated. Those microscopic carbide bands from the Wootz ingot were stretched and twisted, layer upon layer, creating the complex, undulating patterns that would later be revealed on the surface. The final, most critical step was the quenching, plunging the glowing hot blade into a chosen liquid to rapidly cool and harden it. The exact medium was a closely guarded secret. Some traditions suggest it was cooled in the urine of a male donkey or even a draft of sharp wind. Hints that the specific thermal properties of the quenching agent were crucial to developing the steel's unique combination of hardness and flexibility. The result was a material that seemed to possess contradictory properties. It was incredibly hard, capable of taking and holding a razor-sharp edge that could withstand the brutal impacts of combat. Yet it was also remarkably tough and flexible, resistant to chipping, cracking, or shattering. A common failure point in other contemporary swords, this combination was its defining superpower. The secret likely lies in those nanostructures modern science has identified, carbon nanotubes and cementite nanowires that formed within the steel during the intricate forging process. These tiny structures, woven through the metal matrix, acted as a form of natural reinforcement, giving the blade its legendary strength and its ability to flex. The beautiful surface pattern, often compared to flowing water or a starry night sky, was not etched on but was a direct visual manifestation of this complex internal architecture, a fingerprint of the smith's skill and the material's unique history. The decline of true Damascus steel is a story of broken chains of knowledge. The production was an art form, reliant on tacit knowledge passed from master to apprentice, and on the use of specific raw materials from particular mines that eventually became depleted. As the industrial age dawned and demand for faster, cheaper production methods increased, the slow, meticulous, and secretive craft of the Damascus smiths faded away. By the 18th century, the exact process had been forgotten. Modern attempts to recreate it have been only partially successful. While blades can be made to mimic the distinctive pattern through modern pattern welding techniques, folding different types of steel together, they lack the unique nanostructures and the legendary performance of the originals. The genuine article remains a ghost, a benchmark of perfection that we can analyze but not quite resurrect, a permanent testament to the fact that the deepest knowledge of the ancient world was not always written down in books, but was instead felt in the heat of the forge, seen in the color of the steel, and passed down through the practiced hands of artists whose entire world was contained within the rhythm of their hammer. While the Antikythera Mechanism stands as a singular, jaw-dropping relic, it was far from the only sophisticated calculating device in the ancient Greek world. It represents the pinnacle of a much broader tradition of mechanical ingenuity, a culture that was deeply invested in creating physical models to understand and navigate a complex universe. Beyond that one miraculous survival, a whole family of ingenious tools flourished, devices that turned the abstract mathematics of the heavens into something you could hold in your hand, adjust with your fingers, and use to solve real-world problems with astonishing accuracy. These weren't crude precursors, they were elegant, refined analog computers in their own right, each one a testament to a different facet of ancient brilliance. Perhaps the most enduring and widespread of these was the astrolabe, a device of such elegance and utility that it remained an essential tool for astronomers, astrologers, and navigators for over 1,000 years. At its heart, the astrolabe was a sophisticated two-dimensional model of the three-dimensional sky. Imagine a beautifully engraved brass disc known as the mater or mother. Inside it, you could place a series of smaller, intricately cut discs called tympans, each one customized for a specific latitude. These tympans were etched with lines representing the local horizon, altitude, and azimuth. Over this, a pierced rotating disc called the rete spun like a star map, its pointers marking the positions of the brightest stars. By aligning the rete with the time and date, a user could solve dozens of problems. They could tell the time day or night by sighting the sun or a star, calculate the exact time of sunrise or sunset for any given day, determine their latitude, and even forecast the positions of celestial bodies for astrology. It was, in essence, a portable planetarium and a sophisticated graphical calculator, all crafted from brass and human intellect. Then there was the planisphere, a slightly simpler but no less brilliant cousin to the astrolabe. Its purpose was more focused, to show which stars were visible in the sky at any given time and date. It consisted of two discs pivoted at their center. The bottom disc held a map of all the visible stars for a full year. The top disc had an oval window representing the horizon. By rotating the top disc to match the current date and time, the window would reveal only those stars that were above the horizon at that exact moment, while hiding those that were below. This provided an instant, customizable star chart, eliminating the need for complex memorization or cumbersome scrolls. For a farmer determining the start of a season, a priest planning a religious festival, or a storyteller tracing the path of a hero through the constellations, the planisphere made the cosmos accessible and predictable. The creation of these devices was itself a monumental intellectual feat. Designing an astrolabe required a deep, practical synthesis of several advanced fields. The craftsman needed a solid grasp of stereographic projection, a complex mathematical technique for mapping a sphere onto a flat plane. They had to possess precise astronomical knowledge to correctly plot the star positions on the rete. They needed the metallurgical skill to work brass to a fine tolerance and the artistic touch to engrave the delicate scales and markings with flawless accuracy. This knowledge wasn't written in a single manual. It was a living tradition passed down from master to apprentice in workshops, a cumulative, centuries-long project of refining and perfecting these mechanical analogues of the universe. Each device was a physical embodiment of generations of observed data and technical skill. This ancient drive to build machines that mimic nature reveals something fundamental about the human mind. The Greeks and the many cultures that followed them had a powerful impulse to externalize their reasoning, to take the intricate clockwork they perceived in the cosmos and build a smaller, tangible version of it that they could interact with and control. This isn't just a primitive version of computing, it's the very essence of the analog computing paradigm. Instead of using binary code and digital logic, they used gears, scales, and rotating disks to create a physical analogy of a mathematical problem. Turning the handle of the Antikythera mechanism or rotating the rete of an astrolabe wasn't just inputting data. It was physically enacting the passage of time or the movement of the stars. The machine's final state was the solution. This tangible, hands-on interaction with complex calculations provided an intuitive understanding that pure mathematics often lacks. Recognizing this rich tradition completely reframes the story of technology. We often imagine the path to the modern computer as a straight line that begins in the mid-20th century. But that view ignores this deep, 2,000-year-old foundation. The ancient Greek world wasn't a false start, it was the original spark. Their devices prove that the core concepts of computation, modeling, simulation, and the mechanization of thought are not modern inventions but ancient human desires. The Antikythera mechanism suddenly seems less like an inexplicable anomaly and more like the natural, if extraordinary, culmination of a widespread and sophisticated technological culture. It reminds us that innovation is almost never a single bolt of lightning from a clear sky, but a slow, collaborative burn, where each generation adds its fuel to the fire, often unaware of how brightly it will one day blaze. While the Greeks were building mechanical models of the cosmos and the Persians were harnessing the desert cold on another continent, an entire civilization was constructing a universe of time so vast and intricate that it challenges our very perception of history itself. For the ancient Maya, time was not a simple, linear path stretching from a forgotten past into an unknown future. It was a sacred, living entity, a complex tapestry woven from multiple, interlocking cycles that resonated with the rhythms of the heavens, the earth, and the human spirit. Their calendar system was not merely a tool for marking days. It was a grand philosophical and scientific achievement, a sophisticated framework for understanding humanity's place within an ordered cosmos, and its accuracy was so profound that it remains a subject of awe and study today. At the heart of this system were three primary cycles, each serving a distinct purpose yet perfectly synchronized with the others. The first, the Hob, was a solar calendar of 365 days, closely approximating our modern Gregorian year. It was divided into 18 months of 20 days each, with a final, abbreviated 5-day period known as the Wayeb, which was considered a dangerous and unlucky time when the veil between worlds was thin. This calendar governed the agricultural cycle, the seasons, and civil ceremonies, organizing the practical rhythm of daily life and the turning of the years. Then there was the Tzolk'in, the sacred calendar of 260 days. This was comprised of 20-day names combined with 13 numbers, creating a 260-day cycle that had no direct correlation to any astronomical phenomenon. Its purpose was divinatory and ritualistic. Each day carried a specific spiritual energy, a unique combination of influences from the gods, and priests would use the Tzolk'in to determine the most auspicious dates for everything from planting crops and going to war to naming children and conducting marriages. It was the heartbeat of Maya spirituality. The true masterpiece, however, was the way these two cycles interacted. The Hob and the Tzolk'in were like two immense, intermeshed gears of different sizes. A specific date required a designation from both calendars, for example, 4-7 For this exact combination to repeat itself, the two cycles had to complete a full revolution relative to each other. This period, known as the calendar round, spanned 52 Hob years, or roughly 52 of our solar years. This 52-year cycle was of immense significance, marking a period of renewal and often celebrated with the construction of new monuments and the kindling of new fires. But the Maya, being thinkers on a truly epic scale, weren't satisfied with a system that reset every 52 years. To record their deep history and prophesize far into the future, they developed the long count. This was a linear count of days from a fixed mythological starting point, a date corresponding to August 11th, 3114 BC in our calendar, which they saw as the dawn of the current creation. The long count was a base 20 system, counting days K in, 20-day periods Winnel, 360-day periods Ton, 7,200-day periods Kayaton, and 144,000-day periods Bayakton. This allowed them to inscribe dates on their monuments that could place an event within a cosmic timeline stretching back and forward for millions of years. This architectural marvel of timekeeping was built upon a foundation of breathtakingly advanced astronomy and mathematics. Maya priests and scribes, likely working from observatories within their towering temple complexes, meticulously tracked the movements of Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and the Sun and Moon. They calculated the solar year to be more accurate than the Julian calendar used in Europe at the time. Their Venusian calendar, used for scheduling wars and the coronations of kings, was precise to just one day of error every 500 years. They could predict solar eclipses with remarkable accuracy. This required not just observation but complex calculations. Crucially, their mathematical system included a concept of zero, represented by a shell glyph, which they used as a placeholder in their sophisticated Vigesimul, or base 20, numbering system. This use of a true zero for positional notation, a conceptual leap that eluded the Romans and the Greeks, was essential for doing the advanced arithmetic needed for their long count and astronomical predictions. Their numbers, composed of simple bars and dots, were a model of elegant efficiency, enabling them to record vast numbers on their stelae and in their bark paper codices. To view the Maya calendar as merely a scientific tool, however, is to miss its profound cultural and spiritual significance. It was the central organizing principle of their entire society, a divine mandate written in the movements of the heavens. Every unit of time was not an empty vessel but was imbued with its own spiritual essence, patron deities, and cosmic influences. The end of a Kayaton cycle, every 20 years, was a major event often marked by the erection of a carved stone monument detailing the events of that period and the prophecies for the next. The calendar dictated the schedule of rituals to appease the gods, ensuring the sun would continue to rise, the rains would come, and the world would not fall back into chaos. It was a contract between humanity and the divine, a way to maintain the balance of the cosmos through precisely timed offerings and ceremonies. This deep interconnection between the celestial and the terrestrial meant that the astronomer priests who could read and interpret this sacred timeline held immense power, guiding kings and shaping the destiny of their civilization with their predictions. The legacy of the Maya calendar system is a powerful reminder that our modern, linear view of time is just one way to comprehend existence. The Maya saw time as cyclical and layered, with history destined to repeat its patterns and themes. Their long count famously entered a new, major cycle in 2012, an event widely and mistakenly sensationalized as a prophecy of the world's end. In reality, it was merely the closing of one grand cycle and the beginning of another, much like our own New Year's celebration but on a scale of millennia. This misinterpretation itself highlights the gap between their worldview and our own. Their achievement stands as a monument to human intellect, a system where rigorous empirical observation and complex mathematics were seamlessly woven into a rich tapestry of myth, religion, and power. It challenges us to expand our own horizons, to consider that tracking time can be about more than just efficiency and deadlines. It can be a profound act of understanding our place in an infinite, vibrating universe. But while the Maya were mapping vast cycles of time with their calendars, another civilization was perfecting a tool to map the space around them, a device that would eventually shrink the world and rewire the very pathways of human connection. The story of the ancient Chinese compass begins not on the rolling deck of a ship, but in the quiet, contemplative space of a diviner's table. Its earliest ancestor wasn't a navigational instrument at all, but a tool for harmonizing with the unseen forces of the universe. As far back as the Han Dynasty, around the 2nd century before the Common Era, Chinese scholars and mystics were fascinated by a curious mineral called lodestone, a naturally magnetic iron ore. They noticed that when a piece of this lodestone was carefully carved into a smooth, spoon-like shape and placed on a highly polished bronze plate, it would consistently spin and settle, always pointing its handle toward the south. This device was known as a south pointer, and its purpose was deeply rooted in the practice of feng shui, the art of aligning buildings, tombs, and spaces with the natural flow of energy, or qi. For centuries, its primary use was to ensure harmony between the human and the cosmic, to site a home or a grave in perfect balance with the magnetic currents of the earth, which were believed to be a physical manifestation of the universal order. The transformation of this mystical spoon into the compass we recognize was a slow, evolutionary process driven by meticulous observation. The lodestone spoon was finicky and not particularly portable. The breakthrough came when someone discovered that you could magnetize an iron needle by stroking it repeatedly with a lodestone. This magnetized needle, once suspended from a silk thread or floated on a tiny reed in a bowl of water, would align itself just as reliably as the heavy spoon, but with far greater sensitivity and ease of use. By the time of the Song dynasty in the 11th century, this technology had been refined into a practical, compact instrument. Craftsmen began enclosing the needle in a wooden box, often shaped like a turtle or a fish, with the cardinal directions carefully marked on its base. This was no longer just a tool for geomancy. It was a precise scientific instrument, and its potential was suddenly obvious to military commanders, traders, and explorers. The impact on navigation was nothing short of revolutionary. Before the compass, open sea voyagers were at the mercy of the weather. Under cloudy skies or on featureless oceans, maintaining a steady course was a matter of guesswork and dead reckoning, often with tragic consequences. The compass changed everything. It provided a constant, reliable reference point that was independent of the stars, the sun, or the coast. For the first time, sailors could venture far from land with confidence, plot straighter and more efficient trade routes, and explore previously unnavigable waters. This newfound accuracy supercharged the maritime trade networks of Asia, and the knowledge of the compass began its slow journey westward along the Silk Road, carried by Arab traders who would later introduce it to European navigators. It was this tool that would eventually underpin the Age of Discovery, enabling the voyages of Columbus, da Gama, and Magellan that forever changed the map of the world. What makes the compass's story so profoundly insightful is the cultural journey it represents. It perfectly illustrates a pattern seen in so many ancient innovations, the seamless blend of science, spirituality, and practical application. It didn't emerge from a vacuum of pure scientific inquiry. It was born from a spiritual desire to understand and align with the cosmos, a desire that led to careful, repeated experimentation with a natural phenomenon. The mystical South Pointer was, in fact, the world's first practical laboratory for studying magnetism. The diviners, in their quest to read the invisible energies of the Earth, were the first to systematically document and harness a fundamental force of physics. Their initial framework was philosophical, but their methods were empirical, and their results were undeniably, reproducibly physical. The compass's evolution from a ritual object to a world-changing tool shows that the path of discovery is rarely a straight line. Often, the deepest scientific truths are first glimpsed through the lens of wonder, and the most practical technologies are born from a desire to answer the most profound questions about our place in the universe. It stands as a timeless reminder that curiosity, in any form, is the true north of human progress. Imagine the sheer ambition of it, a city of over 1 million people, the largest the world had ever seen, all needing fresh water to drink, to bathe, to supply its countless public baths, fountains, and latrines. The local springs and the Tiber River, polluted and unreliable, could never suffice. The Roman solution was not to pray for rain or to ration what little they had, but to conquer geography itself. They reached out with stone and concrete, snatching water from the pure mountain sources dozens of miles away and delivering it directly to the heart of the capital in a continuous, gravity-fed torrent. This was the aqueduct, and it was far more than a water delivery system. It was the very artery of the empire, a symbol of a civilization that believed no natural obstacle was too great to overcome for the sake of public order, health, and grandeur. The engineering behind these structures is a masterclass in applied physics and relentless precision. The key was gravity. From the source, typically a spring captured in a large, settling tank, the water began its long, gradual descent toward the city. The entire channel, whether an underground pipe or a towering arcade, had to maintain a consistent, gentle slope, often a drop of only a few inches every 100 feet, to keep the water moving at a steady pace without eroding the conduit walls. Achieving this over such vast distances required surveying skills that border on the miraculous. Roman engineers used simple but brilliantly effective tools like the chorobates, a massive, water-leveled wooden frame, and the groma for sighting straight lines to plot a course across valleys and through mountains. They would tunnel through solid rock for miles, build massive inverted siphons to cross deep ravines, and erect the iconic, soaring arcades we picture today, not for show, but to maintain that crucial, unbroken gradient across rolling landscapes. The mathematics involved in calculating these gradients and the volumes of water flow was incredibly sophisticated, ensuring that pressure never built too high and that delivery was consistent and reliable. But bringing fresh water in was only half the equation. The other, equally brilliant half was carrying wastewater out. This is where the Cloaca Maxima, or the greatest sewer, enters the story. Begun as early as the 6th century BCE, it started as an open drain to channel stormwater and waste from the Forum Romanum to the Tiber. Over centuries, it was expanded, enclosed, and integrated into a vast, city-wide network of underground sewers. This wasn't just a ditch, it was a monumental brick-lined tunnel, large enough in parts for a man to walk through standing upright. The city's latrines, both public and private, as well as the runoff from public baths, were systematically fed into this network, which used the same principle of gravity flow to constantly flush the waste toward the river. The Romans even had a goddess for it, Clocina, the divine spirit who presided over this essential, if unglamorous, circulatory system that kept the city clean. The impact on public health and urban livability cannot be overstated. For the first time in history, a major city enjoyed a standard of sanitation that would not be seen again in Europe until the 19th century. The constant supply of fresh water from the aqueducts fed public fountains on nearly every street corner, providing free, clean drinking water for all citizens, rich and poor. The abundant water supply fed the famous Roman baths, which were not merely places to get clean but social hubs central to daily life, promoting hygiene on a massive scale. Meanwhile, the efficient sewage system carried away the waste that would have otherwise festered in open ditches, drastically reducing the incidence of waterborne diseases like cholera and dysentery that plagued other ancient and medieval cities. This two-pronged attack on disease, importing cleanliness and exporting filth, created a healthier, more populous, and more stable urban center than anyone had dreamed possible. Ultimately, the true genius of Roman water management was its holistic vision. They didn't see aqueducts and sewers as separate projects, but as two integrated parts of a single public health infrastructure. This was a civilization that understood, at a profound level, that the greatness of a city was measured not just by its temples and palaces, but by the quality of life it provided for its citizens. The abundant water allowed for industry, for firefighting, for spectacular displays in amphitheaters, and for the lush gardens of the wealthy. It was a public good paid for by the state that benefited everyone and demonstrated the power and benevolence of the empire itself. The enduring lesson of the aqueduct is not just about arches and water flow. It is about foresight. It is about a society's willingness to make immense, long-term investments in the health and well-being of its people, building not for the next election or fiscal year, but for the next millennium. These silent, enduring structures whisper a challenge across the ages, asking us what foundations we are laying for the future and what our own civilization will leave behind when the glittering monuments of our age have turned to dust. While the Romans were mastering the flow of water across their empire, let's rewind the clock even further to a civilization that first mastered the flow of another elemental force, the river itself. For the ancient Egyptians, the Nile was not just a source of water. It was their highway, their calendar, their god, and the very lifeblood of their kingdom. To navigate this powerful, meandering river and the treacherous waters beyond, they didn't just build simple reed rafts. They engineered some of the most sophisticated and seaworthy vessels the ancient world had ever seen, turning a natural resource into a tool for empire building, spiritual journeying, and global connection. Their shipbuilding prowess reveals a level of technological sophistication that goes far beyond what we might expect from a society known for its pyramids and pharaohs. The evidence for this maritime brilliance isn't just found in tomb paintings. It's been physically preserved for millennia. In 1954, archaeologists made a stunning discovery in a sealed pit at the foot of the Great Pyramid of Giza. There, disassembled into 1,251 individual pieces, lay the solar barge of Pharaoh Khufu. This was not a symbolic model. It was a fully functional, massive cedarwood ship, over 140 feet long, designed to carry the resurrected king with the sun god Ra across the heavens for eternity. When reassembled, the vessel revealed a construction technique of breathtaking complexity and strength. Instead of using nails which could work loose and rust, or simply lashing planks together, the Egyptian shipwrights used a method called mortise and tenon joinery. They would carve a protruding tongue or tenon on the edge of one plank and a perfectly matching slot or mortise on the adjoining plank. These pieces were then hammered together, often with dowels locking them in place, creating a hull that was flexible yet incredibly strong, able to twist and flex with the waves without cracking apart. This is the same principle used in fine furniture making and classical architecture, but the Egyptians were applying it on a massive, nautical scale over 4,500 years ago. But their innovation didn't stop at joinery. These ships were marvels of hydrodynamic design, born from centuries of intimate observation of the Nile's currents. The typical Egyptian riverboat had a shallow draft, allowing it to navigate the Nile's shifting sandbanks and shallow channels. Its hull was often flat-bottomed for stability in calm river waters. However, for seafaring voyages, they developed a different design entirely. Vessels intended for trade on the open Mediterranean, like those that sailed to the fabled land of Punt to bring back incense, gold, and exotic animals, had a more pronounced hull curvature and a stronger keel to handle ocean swells. They understood the need for different ship designs for different purposes, a concept central to modern naval architecture. They even developed clever sailing rigs. Their single large square sail, mounted on a bipod mast, was highly effective for sailing with the prevailing north wind blowing south up the Nile. To return north, they could simply lower the sail and let the river's current carry them downstream, or use oars for more precise maneuvering. This intimate understanding of wind patterns and currents turned the Nile into a predictable two-way highway. The impact of this technology on Egyptian civilization was absolutely transformative. These ships were the logistical backbone of the state. They transported the massive limestone and granite blocks for pyramid construction from quarries hundreds of miles away. They facilitated trade networks that stretched across the known world. From Lebanon, they imported the coveted cedar wood. From Nubia, they brought gold and ivory. From the land of Punt, thought to be in the Horn of Africa, they acquired myrrh, ebony, and live baboons. This wasn't just commerce, it was an exchange of culture, ideas, and luxury goods that cemented Egypt's power and prestige. Furthermore, these vessels were central to their religious cosmology. The solar barge buried at Giza was a functional vessel for a spiritual journey, a physical boat for a metaphysical voyage. The annual festival of Opet involved a grand procession where the sacred barks of the gods were carried on the shoulders of priests and then placed on splendid ships to travel from Karnak to Luxor, reenacting divine myths and reinforcing the pharaoh's divine connection right in the heart of the public realm. The legacy of Egyptian shipbuilding is a powerful testament to a society that looked at a river and saw a road to eternity. They didn't just use the materials they found, they engineered them, transforming bundles of papyrus and logs of imported cedar into sophisticated machines for transport, trade, and transcendence. Their mortise and tenon joints would later be adopted and perfected by the Phoenicians, Greeks, and Romans, becoming the standard for Mediterranean shipbuilding for centuries. In their elegant, durable hulls, we see the reflection of a pragmatic and spiritual people who understood that to control the water was to control their destiny, building vessels not just to navigate the Nile, but to sail into the afterlife itself, ensuring their journey would continue long after their feet had left the earth. Now let's journey from the sun-drenched river valleys of Egypt to the misty forests of Bronze Age Europe, where a discovery so significant and unexpected would completely rewrite our understanding of the continent's ancient past. It was the year 1999, and two treasure hunters armed with metal detectors were working illegally on a hilltop near the town of Nebra in Germany. Their equipment chirped and they began to dig, expecting perhaps a few coins or a simple artifact. Instead, they unearthed a bizarre and breathtaking object, a bronze disc about the size of a large dinner plate, adorned with golden symbols that seemed to depict the sun, a crescent moon, and a smattering of stars. They had no idea that they were holding what would soon be declared the oldest known concrete representation of the cosmos in the world, an artifact that would shatter the long-held belief that prehistoric Europeans were simple, unsophisticated farmers with no advanced astronomical knowledge. The Nebra sky disk, as it came to be known, is a window into a mind that looked up at the heavens 3,600 years ago and sought not just to wonder, but to understand and to record. The initial interpretation of the disk symbol seems straightforward. On the left, a large golden circle represents either the full sun or the full moon. To the upper right, a graceful crescent moon arcs. Scattered between them are 32 smaller golden dots, most likely stars, with one particularly dense cluster of 7 that has captivated researchers. This group almost certainly represents the Pleiades star cluster, a celestial marker of critical importance to agricultural societies across the ancient world for its role in signaling the changing seasons. But the story doesn't end there. Later, 2 golden arcs were added to the left and right edges of the disk, followed by a final, mysterious arc at the bottom that some interpret as a solar barge, a mythological boat that carries the sun through the underworld at night, or perhaps a rainbow. Each addition wasn't mere decoration. It was an upgrade, a new layer of meaning and function added to the device over time, transforming it from a simple star chart into a sophisticated calendrical and cosmological instrument. The true genius of the disk lies in how these elements work together as a practical, agricultural computer. Think of a Bronze Age farmer living by the rhythms of the seasons. Knowing precisely when to plant and when to harvest was a matter of survival. The Pleiades cluster, which disappears below the horizon for a period in the spring and reappears in the autumn, was a crucial natural clock. The Nebra sky disk provided a way to sync the lunar calendar, which is only 354 days long, with the solar agricultural year of 365 days. Here's how it might have worked. When the crescent moon appeared in the sky in the same position relative to the Pleiades as shown on the disk, it would signal that a 13th month needed to be added to the lunar year to bring it back in line with the solar cycle. This simple, elegant device effectively allowed its users to harmonize the moon's phases with the sun's journey, preventing their calendar from drifting into chaos and ensuring their community could reliably predict the turn of the seasons years in advance. The creation of such an object speaks volumes about the society that produced it. This was no casual project. It required the coordinated effort of multiple specialized experts. First, miners had to extract copper ore from the Alps, which was then smelted and alloyed with tin from as far away as Cornwall, England, to create the bronze disc. Then, a master metalsmith had to carefully hammer and shape it. The gold appliques were made from gold mined in the Carpathian Mountains of modern-day Romania. An individual, or more likely a group, with sophisticated astronomical knowledge had to dictate the precise placement of each symbol. Finally, all these components, sourced from hundreds of miles apart, had to be assembled in a single location. This reveals a Bronze Age Europe that was far from isolated. It was a continent crisscrossed by vast, functioning trade networks, exchanging not only raw materials but also ideas, technologies, and knowledge. The disk is physical proof of a pan-European cultural sphere with a shared understanding of the heavens. Beyond its practical use, the disk almost certainly held profound spiritual significance. The hilltop where it was buried, the Mittelberg, is not an arbitrary location. From its summit, the sun appears to set behind the Brocken, the highest peak in the Harz Mountains, on the summer solstice. This was clearly a sacred landscape, a place where the celestial and the terrestrial realms met. The disk itself, with its gold shining against the blue-green patina of the bronze, possibly achieved through the application of rotten egg juice to create a deliberate chemical treatment, would have been a dazzling, almost magical object. It wasn't just a tool for counting days. It was a portable representation of the cosmic order, a sacred emblem that perhaps gave a priest or chieftain the authority to declare the correct time for rituals, plantings, and ceremonies. It unified the practical need to track time with the spiritual belief in a harmonious universe governed by predictable celestial laws. The Nebra sky disk forces us to abandon any lingering notion of prehistoric Europe as a dark, primitive backwater. This single object testifies to a society capable of abstract thought, precise observation, long-distance trade, and complex craftsmanship. It represents a point where science, art, and religion were utterly intertwined, different facets of a single effort to comprehend the world. It's a humble, yet infinitely sophisticated, declaration from the depths of time that the human drive to find meaning in the stars is truly ancient and universal. This was not the beginning of astronomy. It is merely our oldest surviving record of it, a silent, golden promise that the sky has always been our first and most enduring map. Yet for all the physical marvels we've explored, from self-healing concrete to celestial computers, perhaps the most profound and enduring invention of the ancient world was not made of stone, metal, or glass, but of pure thought. It was an idea so powerful, so fundamentally abstract, that it seems to have no physical form at all, the concept of nothing. This is the story of how ancient Indian mathematicians gazed into the void and saw not emptiness, but the foundation for all of modern mathematics, engineering, and science. Their breakthrough was the creation of zero as a number, a philosophical and mathematical leap that would forever change humanity's ability to comprehend and calculate the universe. Before this revolution, ancient number systems were profoundly limited. The brilliant Romans, for all their engineering prowess, struggled with their cumbersome numeral system. Try multiplying 238 by 17 using Roman numerals, and you'll quickly understand the problem. The Babylonians and Mayans had placeholder symbols that hinted at the concept of zero, but these were merely punctuation marks to separate digits, not a number that could be used in calculations. They had no way to express a quantity of nothing, to represent the absence of value as a value itself. This was the intellectual cage that Indian thinkers shattered. The first known explicit use of a circle to represent the number zero appears in the 7th century Common Era, in inscriptions at a temple in Gwalior, India. But the conceptual groundwork was laid centuries earlier. The ancient Indian text, the Vedas, often spoke philosophically of sunya, or the void, a state of nothingness that was full of potential. This philosophical exploration of emptiness provided the fertile ground from which the mathematical zero could grow. The true architects of this new numerical universe were two geniuses separated by centuries. The first, Aryabhatta, working in the 5th century, was a revolutionary. In his monumental work, the Aryabhatiya, he didn't just use a placeholder, he operated with a revolutionary new decimal place value system. He presented methods for extracting square and cube roots and solving linear equations, calculations that are virtually impossible without a concept of zero. He treated it as an operational entity, though he didn't yet give it a formal name or symbol. Then, 200 years later, the mathematician and astronomer Brahmagupta took the final, breathtaking step. In his text, the Brahmasphutasiddhanta, or the correctly established doctrine of Brahma, he didn't just describe zero, he defined it. He laid out the formal rules for arithmetic with zero, stating clearly that a number subtracted from itself is zero. Most importantly, he established the rules that still baffle schoolchildren today, that a number multiplied by zero is zero, and that a number divided by zero, well, he correctly identified that as a special, undefined case. For the first time in history, nothing had become something. Zero was now a full citizen in the Republic of Numbers with defined properties and behaviors. The immediate impact of this discovery was like handing a key to a locked door. Suddenly, astronomers like Aryabhata could perform the incredibly complex calculations needed to predict eclipses and planetary motions with stunning new accuracy. Architects and builders could calculate areas, volumes, and stresses with a precision that was previously unimaginable, enabling the construction of ever more ambitious temples and structures. In the bustling marketplaces, merchants could keep ledgers, calculate compound interest, and manage large-scale trade with an efficiency that fueled economic growth. The decimal system, with zero at its heart, allowed for the elegant representation of both astronomically large numbers and infinitesimally small fractions with equal ease. This wasn't just a new way of writing numbers, it was a new way of thinking about quantity, space, and relationship. It was the birth of a flexible, powerful mathematical language that could describe the world with unprecedented clarity. But the journey of zero from an Indian idea to a global cornerstone is a story of cross-cultural exchange that took centuries. Arab scholars, encountering these revolutionary Indian texts through trade and intellectual networks, immediately recognized their power. The Persian mathematician Al-Khwarizmi, in the 9th century, wrote a seminal treatise on the Indian numeral system, which included the vital zero. His work was later translated into Latin in the 12th century, introducing these Arabic numerals and the concept of zero to a Europe still struggling with abacuses and Roman numerals. The resistance was significant. Many in Europe viewed zero with deep suspicion, seeing it as a dangerous pagan concept that represented nothingness and chaos. But its utility was undeniable. Slowly, over centuries, it replaced older systems, and by the Renaissance, it had become the indispensable foundation for the scientific revolution. The calculus of Newton and Leibniz, the physics of Galileo, the entire edifice of modern engineering and finance, none of it would exist without the foundational concept of zero that began as a philosophical meditation on the void in ancient India. The ultimate legacy of this invention is a humbling reminder of how the most abstract ideas can have the most concrete consequences. Zero is more than a number, it is a paradigm shift. It is the idea that nothingness can be quantified, that absence has a value, that the void itself is a necessary component of understanding the fullness of existence. It demonstrates a culture that saw no divide between the spiritual and the scientific, where philosophical inquiry into the nature of reality could directly lead to practical, world-changing innovation. Every time we use a computer which operates on binary code, a language of ones and zeros, every time we check our bank balance, every time a scientist calculates the trajectory of a spacecraft, we are engaging in a dialogue with those ancient Indian mathematicians. Their intellectual courage to formalize nothingness gave us the tool to create everything we know in the modern world. It is the ultimate proof that the most powerful inventions are not always things you can hold in your hand, but are sometimes the ideas you hold in your mind, ideas with the power to reshape reality itself. So what does it all mean? This journey through 23 astonishing inventions is far more than a simple list of curiosities. It's a powerful reminder that the spark of genius is not a modern phenomenon, but a constant, glowing thread woven through the entire tapestry of human history. From the intricate bronze gears of the Antikythera Mechanism to the abstract, world-changing power of zero, these marvels collectively dismantle a pervasive and arrogant myth, the idea of linear progress, that we today stand at the pinnacle of a long, slow climb from primitive ignorance. The truth, as these artifacts scream at us across the centuries, is so much more interesting. Innovation is not a straight line. It's a complex web of brilliant flashes, periods of intense cultivation, and tragic forgetting. Civilizations have risen to breathtaking heights of understanding, only to have that knowledge fade, waiting patiently in the soil for a future generation to rediscover it and be humbled. These inventions challenge us to reconsider the very definition of technology itself. We often equate it with silicon chips and steel, with complexity and power consumption. But the ancient world offers a masterclass in a different kind of sophistication, one of elegance, sustainability, and deep harmony with the natural world. The Roman concrete that heals its own cracks, the Persian yakchul that makes ice in the desert using only wind and night air, the Inca stonework that dances with earthquakes rather than resisting them. These are technologies of profound intelligence that ask an urgent, modern question. What if our path to the future isn't about building bigger and more complex, but about learning to build smarter, with a deeper respect for the materials and forces we have always had at our disposal? The past, in this light, becomes not a distant country, but a vast and largely untapped library of sustainable solutions. Perhaps the most thrilling takeaway is the sense of possibility that these discoveries unleash. If so much has been lost, the formula for Greek fire, the exact technique for Damascus steel, the full purpose of the Phaistos Disc, then what other wonders still lie buried, waiting to be found? The Nebra sky disk was only unearthed in 1999. New sections of the Antikythera Mechanism are still being understood with each advance in imaging technology. Every time an archaeologist's trowel turns up something unexpected, it has the potential to rewrite our entire understanding of a culture's capabilities. This makes history not a dead, static subject, but a dynamic field of detective work, where a single discovery in a farmer's field or a forgotten shipwreck can change everything we thought we knew. The past is not a closed book, it is an ongoing excavation, and we have likely only read the first few chapters. This is why your curiosity matters. The story of human innovation is our shared story, and it continues to be written with every question we ask and every mystery we choose to pursue. These 23 inventions are an invitation to look at the world with fresh eyes, to question the standard narratives, and to appreciate the incredible ingenuity of our ancestors. They inspire today's scientists and engineers who are now studying Roman concrete to create self-healing infrastructure, or reverse engineering the properties of Damascus steel at the nanoscale. The past is actively informing our future. If this exploration has sparked a sense of wonder in you, then that's the entire point. Share that wonder. Tell us in the comments which invention amazed you the most, or what other ancient mysteries you'd love to see explored. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the forgotten corners of history. Because the greatest invention of all is the human mind's endless capacity for curiosity, and that is a flame that must never be allowed to go out. Keep